Good afternoon. Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Okay. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to discuss Dr. Daniel Reiche's new book, Success and Failure of Countries at the Olympic Games. Dr. Reiche's book seeks to answer the following questions. Why are countries aiming for success at the Olympic Games, and which policy instruments are countries utilizing to achieve their sporting goals? At today's book launch event, the question of our discussion focuses on what could be learned from Dr. Reiche's work for Lebanon. This is a highly relevant political question since Lebanon's success in international sport could hopefully contribute to national pride and serve as a tool for social integration. Over the past summer, there has been a lot of international media exposure about Dr. Reiche's work. The long list includes Le Monde, Guardian, Spiegel Online, Brazil, BBC Brazil, The Washington Post, and India's Life Minute. I would like to quote some of the articles I found most interesting about Reiche's book. In an article entitled Cold War Era Strategies That Everyone Uses to Win Olympic Gold in Words, a digital global business news publication, the author states, today the Soviet bloc may have dissolved, but its centrally planned approach to sports endures. As political scientist Daniel Reiche argues in his new book, again, Success and Failure of Countries at the Olympic Games, top athletes around the world now benefit from policies pioneered by communist states half a century ago. Mark Whitehouse argues in his editorial entitled What the Olympics Don't Measure for Bloomberg View, quote, in short, success at the Rio Olympics isn't correlated with much of anything that people use to judge countries. Rather, as the social scientist Daniel Reiche has asserted, it probably has a lot more to do with how countries choose to allocate resources. Fareed Zakaria, an Indian-American journalist well known for hosting a CNN show on international issues and public affairs, wrote in his weekly column for the Washington Post, quote, it turns out that good public policy is key, as Daniel Reiche, who has written a book to try to explain the secrets of Olympic success. He asks, for instance, why Kenya is able to win 29 times as many medals as Saudi Arabia, though it is 17 times poorer. His answer is a policy formula that he terms WISE, all in capital letters, which breaks down into 4 areas. Empower women in order to unlock the potential of half of the population, build strong sports institutions in the country, specialize in some sports, and become an early adopter of new techniques and sports. Countries that adopt some of these strategies do well. New Zealand, Denmark, Croatia, and most remarkably, Jamaica. Dr. Reiche told us that book launches are usually boring, and they do tend to be boring. and that he wishes a more interactive and entertaining format. And this is the reason we are here today. To make sure that our author's wishes are respected, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a moderator for today's event. And he is not an ordinary moderator. Mr. Joseph Abi Chahine is well known as presenter of a weekly TV sports program that is aired every Monday on Nadim TV. He's also a sports journalist who reported for the AFP from 2016 Summer Olympic Games in Rio. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Abi Chahine and hand the microphone. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you all for being here with us today. I will say that Dr. Reiche is an associate professor for comparative politics at the American University of Beirut and a visiting scholar at the Harvard University Institute for Quantitative Social Science. Professor Hilal Khashan, thank you, is a professor of political science and chair of AUB's Department of Political Studies and Public Administration. Mr. Wadih Abdelnour is the president of the Lebanese Sports Press Federation, senior editor at Al Hayat, media coordinator of the Lebanese football team, Olympic lecturer in sports management. Gaby Issa-El-Khoury, associate professor in the School of Architecture at Alba and University of Balamand, member of the Research Council at the University of Balamand, AUB athletics varsity coach, and he was a participant of the 1984 Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles, long jump, and the author of the book Rio 2016. And the author of the book Rio 2016, The Best Lebanese Athletes, 2012-2015. Nadim Nassif, assistant professor and academic advisor of the physical education and sports major and FIFA CIES sports management program manager in NDU University, Lebanon. Mr. Mazen Fawzi Ramadan, owner of Mazen Ramadan Consulting Engineers and Evolution Sports Architecture, executive board member of the Lebanese Olympic Committee, member of the Sports and Education Committee in the Olympic Council of Asia, former senior advisor of the Lebanese Minister of Youth and Sport, president of Olympic Solidarity and Sport for all committees in the Lebanese Olympic Committee and FIFA and AFC match commissioner. And 1 year he was the best AFC commissioner in Asia. So I would start where Professor Reiche had the conclusion of this book, Success and Failure of Countries at the Olympic Games, Summer and Winter. There's an increasing gap between countries competing for medals in the Olympic Games and countries which are just spectators in the Gold War, not the Cold War, the Gold War as in gold medals. First group is mainly comprised of developed countries with increasing government involvement in the elite sports sector, greater expenditures on competition, international sport, and the adoption of similar best practice elite sport policies. While developing countries such as Lebanon lack such a strategic approach. And the primary achievement for Lebanese is only participation in the games. Usually in Lebanon we have small team sizes, no medals won, most Olympic athletes being dependent on invitation places instead of earning spots by qualifying, and frequent losses in the first round of the events, unfortunately. But winning medals at the Olympic Games is not completely impossible for developing countries, as the examples, like Professor Khashan said, of Ethiopia and Kenya demonstrate. Lebanon could do the same by focusing on one sport maybe. Ethiopia and Kenya give their most promising athletes the opportunity to focus on their athletic talent by recruiting them to state institutions such as the army, something other developing countries like Lebanon should also consider in order to make sporting success more likely. Professor Reiche, we can read here that you are a professor for comparative politics. What was the reason that you write a book about sports and you are a professor for comparative politics?
Yeah, what's that supposed to do with political science? That's a good question. I think there's increasing governmental involvement all over the world into the sports sector, and also the expenditure is increasing. And so this is why we talk about a gold war rather than a cold war.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a much better war than a military war. And I think the reason is actually a good reason, because the world has never been so peaceful like now. I know it's a difficult statement to make if we are close to a war zone and we have more than 1 million refugees, but if it comes to like wars between countries, the statement is true. And there have never been so many democracies in the world like we have now. There is a democracy peace theory that states that democracies are less likely to be in war with each other. However, this does not mean that countries have equal weight in global affairs. They compete for power. They compete for military power, economic power, and soft power. And sports, and particularly the Olympic Games, are a perfect platform to compete for soft power, to be attractive to other countries. And some countries like Norway and New Zealand have done a pretty good job by punching far above their weight in global affairs with, for example, being successful at the Olympic Games.
Professor Reiche, success and failure at the Olympic Games. What is success? In winning medals, in participating, in maybe like developing countries like Lebanon in being 6th or 7th in the ranking? Is it a success? How do you define success in the games?
Yeah, I think success is needs to be defined case by case.
Yes.
The United States of America would be very upset if they are not a leading sporting nation. So for them, the Olympic Games have always been a platform for a discourse of being a dominant nation. So in the entire history of the modern Olympics, the US has always been on top, just their competitors changed. In the first phase of the Olympics, it has been Great Britain, then it was the Soviets, now it's the Chinese, but the US were always on top. So they want to prove to be a dominant, powerful nation. If we take the other end of the spectrum, like Palestine, for example, I think they just make a party every night that they are allowed to participate in the Olympic Games, which they are allowed to do since 1996. The International Olympic Committee has 206 members. The United Nations only have 193. So some countries are doing a pretty good job, like Palestine, like Kosovo, to first become a member of the IOC on their way to gain statehood and being recognized by the international community, also politically. So for Palestine, for example, it's just about participating. And we can discuss today, what is it about for Lebanon?
Of course.
Because in this broad spectrum, they might be a little bit closer to Palestine than to the US. But if we look back, Lebanon won 4 medals in the history of the Olympic Games. So there were some successes, but they're a while ago.
I'll get back to you. Mr. Mazen Ramadan, he was supposed to be the head of the Lebanese delegation to the Rio Olympic Games, but unfortunately he was injured like lots of athletes. Sports injury. He has Achilles tendons problem. Salamtak. Mr. Ramadan, why do you think Lebanon cannot afford the Gold War? Because even though we've been in this country through lots of wars, only the Gold War we are not successful.
With the short time available for this big discussion, to summarize, I think that it's, after all, a government decision whether to support sport in general, whether to consider sport as one of the priorities of the well-being of the population, or it's considered as just a pastime in the free time. So unless we have a clear, I think, decision and being convinced that sport is as much important sector as any other sector that is considered important, I don't see that we can go further in the table of medals or in the results.
Mr. Ramadan, in 1984 in Los Angeles we had 22 participants, the highest number. Seoul 88 we had 21, but the number is decreasing, even though at 94 we had 4. Why do you think the team numbers is declining?
As you know, the system of qualification has changed since then. Now there is a more strict system for qualification. Only athletes who get a certain level on the international level of the international championship can qualify, and that's why they created. So the system system is much difficult now. You cannot just nominate whatever athlete that you have to send to the Olympics. They have to cross certain numbers or scores internationally in order to. And when it was started to implement, we see that on the contrary, the number of athletes has increased from 5 in Sydney, 6 in and 5 I think in Athens, and then 6 in China, Beijing, 10 in London, and 9 in Rio.
Yes.
So once the qualification system has entered the system, this is the situation.
Thank you. Professor Reiche, logically, as you say here, explaining success and failure at the Olympic Games is a complex challenge. While it might be helpful in many cases to study macro variables such as population, size, and the GDP, they do not explain outliers such as Uruguay in soccer. They won the World Cup in 1930 and 1950, and Cuba in boxing, Kenya and Ethiopia in running at the Olympics. You had this new formula, WISE, W-I-S-E. Before starting to explain what is this new formula, why don't you think that GDP and size and population are the main factor of success?
Well, as a political science professor, I should argue politics matter, right? But if we look at it, I think certainly GDP is the strongest general characteristic, and rich countries are more likely to be successful in sport than poorer countries. However, there are outliers on both ends. So we have wealthy countries. Saudi Arabia was mentioned, but also others like Finland and Sweden, which do very well on other policies, are not good in sports. If we see the all-time Olympic medal ranking, they won a lot of medals, but they won most of them in the first part of the 20th century. And this is why the reason is that they did not implement some policies which are now common standard among other developed countries, such as specializing on most medal promising sports, because they said this is against the egalitarian approach they have in their countries. So we have outliers on both ends. We have wealthy countries that are not successful, and we have poor countries like Kenya, like Ethiopia, like Cuba, that are successful. And
Yes.
If we just look at the recent games, we have countries like Fiji and Kosovo with smaller population sizes and lower GDPs than Lebanon, who both won a gold medal. And the good news from the Middle East is that Jordan won its first gold medal in its entire history in Taekwondo.
Yes. Back to Lebanon, Mr. Gaby Issa-El-Khoury, what are your reflections about the Lebanese university system? You are an expert in sports at universities. Do you think it can be better organized to contribute to success?
Unfortunately, in Lebanon, the sports at universities is not at the top of the spectrum. Clubs are leading in this sense. But these days, I think that universities with AUB and the Lebanese Federation, the University Federation, are trying to put something in like league. And I know that AUB is in a league with 7 other universities, and that will help promoting sports in universities. We're trying this year to have track and field with the league, which is really a good idea. Okay. And in the States, sports is definitely in the university. If you can reach this stage, that would be great.
Yeah. I'll move to Mr. Nadim Nassif. Nadim, he created a new elite sports ranking, an accurate evaluation of countries' performances. First of all, I was asking myself, let's say Dr. Reiche was talking about gold medals, silver medals, bronze medals. Are medals equal? Like, let's say Usain Bolt is the fastest athlete in the world. USA national basketball team, the dream team in basketball. But there are some sports, let's say, no offense, like judo, taekwondo, maybe like some weights. You know, there's like tens or hundreds of athletes in the world in some sports, but there's like 100 or like say 200 million basketball players in some continents. Are medals equal? So Mr. Nassif had a new and revolutionary, let's say, elite sports ranking, and it's different comparing to the Olympic, International Olympic IOC ranking. Can you explain about this ranking, Nadim?
I have it on the poster here, but I'm just going to give you the main idea. As Mr. Abishain was saying, I think something said by an Egyptian colleague caught my attention. If you look to the Olympic medal table, Ethiopia is ranked, excuse me, I had a game yesterday, so I had to shut up my players.
He's a coach also.
That's why. But we won at the end. So the thing, Ethiopia is always ranked above Egypt. Ethiopia has only some good runners. But Egypt can beat Ethiopia in all the other sports. So in my humble opinion, the Olympic ranking is not accurate at all. First of all, I mean, you have, let's say, women weightlifting. Under 48 kilos or under 52 kilos. How many women athletes do weightlifting at under 48 kilos? How many serious athletes you have? Perhaps 100, 200. How many millions of basketball players you have? In how many countries basketball is important? Basketball offers you 2 medals, men and women. Weightlifting can offer you 10. So basically, the Olympic medal table, I think, is completely inaccurate. Moreover, if you take the combined Winter and Summer Olympic medal table, 2012, 2014, only 84 countries were ranked. What about the 122 that were not ranked, did not have any medal? For example, Chile did not have any medal, but they reached second round of the Football World Cup. Is it more difficult to win a medal in Olympic weightlifting or to reach the second round of the Football World Cup? So I created a system, I can show it if there is a time, and I did a poster where I can show it later in detail. What I did a pointing system for each sport, from the first to the end, to the last one, and I put points. And at the end, I multiply this point by coefficient of universality and popularity for each sport. Let's say you're the number 1 country in football, you have much more points than being number 1 country in curling or in luge or this sport where you have less country. In terms of popularity, I took the index of a website created by an economist called Michael Brown. He did a pointing system, he did a screening all the sport websites around the world, and he gave a ranking for popularity for each sport. Concerning universality, I checked if the sport is part of the University Sport Federation, Olympics, School Sport Federation, Army Sport Federation, and then I did coefficient for each sport. So I multiply the points you get in each sport. If you're number 1, you get certain amount of points. I'm not going to go into details.
Sorry, Nadim, but what is Lebanon's ranking in your
In 2014, we were ranked 95. In 2017,
comparing to IOC?
We were not ranked at IOC because we didn't have any medal.
Okay.
So this ranking allowed us to have a ranking for Lebanon. 95, 2014, 97, 2015.
Thank you. Professor Reiche, now we will get into the main subject, WISE,
206.
WISE formula. Professor Reiche introduced in this book what he called WISE formula. The Y stands for the promotion of women in sport. The I, institutionalization of the promotion of Olympic sports. The S, specialization in medal promising sports. And E, the early adoption of trends such as sports newly added to the Olympic program. Professor Reiche, let's start with the W, promotion of women in sport. You say that a country cannot excel at the Olympics. China, which is the most successful country at recent Summer Olympics, apart from the United States, has one of the highest female participation rates among all countries in the world. Why women?
Yeah.
WW.
I mean, first of all, we had Rio among the 9 Lebanese athletes, 5 women. I think that's pretty good. So 5 out of 9. In London, it were 7 out of 10. So this shows that Lebanon is far more open and modern country than other countries in the region. So it's very difficult to be successful in sport if you exclude half of the population. And almost half of the Olympic events are for women. This has not always been the case, but the IOC has gradually increased the number of female events. And there is now, since 2 decades, the policy if a sport is newly added to the Olympic program, it has to be added for men and women. So this is why, for a very long time, rugby did not become an Olympic sport, because the International Rugby Federation had big trouble to attract rugby for women. This has changed now. So it was newly added to the Olympic program this year in Rio. From my point of view, it was one of the most attractive competitions. China has been absent from the Olympic Games as they have in total followed isolationist policy until the 80s, before they opened economically and in other areas, and they started to participate in the Olympics 1984. They stated from the very early beginning the objective to become an Olympic superpower.
Yes.
And how did they do it? They promote women. The majority of the Chinese athletes has been women. The majority of the Chinese medals have been won by women. And this is a little bit linked to other letters, so they are like interconnections.
Yes.
Because, for example, they strategically choose some sports such as women weightlifting, which has become in 2000 Olympic sport, which is totally dominated by China.
Okay.
Maybe one sentence to our part of the world. Iran had won before Rio 60 medals in its entire Olympic history, all by men. If Iran would have won another 60 medals by women, there would be a medium Olympic power like New Zealand, like Greece. Now in Rio, they won the first female medal, which was like historic. Women in Taekwondo won the first medal for Iran.
Yes. Mr. Wadih Abdelnour, he's the media responsible in the Lebanese soccer national team. Before the 2014 World Cup, Lebanon has achieved one of its best results. Lebanon qualified to the last round, final round in the Asian qualifiers. Mr. Abdelnour, can you tell us about this experience with the German coach, another colleague of Dr. Reiche, Theo Bucher. But unfortunately, after this big achievement, we had a huge match-fixing scandal for the Lebanese national team, and lots of players were banned, like playing with the teams and Lebanon. Can you tell us about this experience?
Forward, Lebanon not as Costa Rica in the World Cup like in Brazil 2014, but this experience was a merged experience concerning Lebanon, concerning the league in Lebanon, concerning the club, concerning all the authorities and the family, sports family. But unfortunately, that you said about this experience after we qualified for the first and the final round, Asian final round, before to qualify for the last step to Brazil. We have this fixed matches that not certainly in the selection team, but in the Liga and the National Liga. So it reflected negative in all the view, in all the area for Lebanon qualifications. And we can mention that 17 players due injuries and due for the 15 matches that what we out, suspended and banned, and a new different team will be now, and after that it's make all margins of difficult to across for about it. Yes.
Professor Reiche's second letter is I. He argued that the institutionalization of the elite sports sector is a precondition for Olympic success. Best practice cases of administrative capacities for Olympic sports are the Australian Institute of Sport, AIS, founded in 1981, and the Norwegian Olympia Toppen, OT, founded in 1988, both of which are classified by some authors as medal factories. Mr. Ramadan, the second letter of Professor Reiche, do you have any identification of sports in Lebanon in which Lebanon could perform well at the international scene, like boxing in Cuba, running in Ethiopia and Kenya? What sports in Lebanon can we concentrate on in the future to have medals?
Actually, it happens that during this once we were discussing the Olympic Committee specifically, and we were asking this kind of question after all the experience that we have. And as you know, more and more people after each Olympics, they tend to find a solution for how to achieve better and how to improve. I'm sure that very few people of the world have the recipe for the success of the Olympics. And every time we find a solution, there are others who are working on different aspects. And I was one time visiting in Tashkent, in Uzbekistan, the Olympic Committee, and I saw they were showing us some part of it. And I saw one big laboratory they call genetic laboratory, where they study the genetics of the kids and the girls at young age, and they try to orient them towards which sport is better for. So science is also part of the decision, not only popularity and geography and climate, etc. But in order not to miss it, I just want to, of course, highlight the importance of the book and the research. I have known Dr. Danyel first time when he issued the War Minus Shooting publication, and I was very impressed by the limited time he was in Lebanon and how he treated the matter in a very professional way. And it's very important to have more books published on sport, treating sometimes related to Lebanon, because believe it or not, science, the sports management science is a new science considered in the whole world, not only Lebanon. And we have very few books treating this kind of subject, not only in Lebanon, definitely in Lebanon, but also in the world. So I can see the dedication and the passion of Dr. Danyel of trying to help us, we as sport administrator and sport manager in Lebanon, to help us to find a solution, as I said, to the enigma, or to how to improve our situation. The work is on, and there are a lot of ideas and a lot of schools of those, if you want, whether the Jamaican, whether the bottom-up, whether the top-down solution like China, bottom-up like Europe. And I want to emphasize on one important thing is that, to me, of course, the medal is very important, but the more important is to have a sports culture, because the medal in itself doesn't always reflects how sport is popular in a country. You might have a gold medal in shooting at one point of time, but it doesn't mean that the sport is in good position in the country.
Thank you, Mazen. Professor Reiche, third letter is S. Specialization, focusing on medal promising sports, has become a key strategy in Olympic policies around the world, and countries that have not introduced such a targeted approach are left behind in the medal rankings. What do you mean by specialization?
Specialization, I mean that it's a global trend to focus on most medal promising sports. We have the case of like Ethiopia and Kenya focusing on running, or Cuba on boxing, Denmark on track cycling.
Australia swimming.
Australia has won 1/3 of all its Olympic medals in swimming. So a specialization seems to me a key, particular for a country of like Lebanon with limited resources. I think what is important for Lebanon, and I should first mention that when I do research on Lebanon, these guys are all my sources, right? So they are those I'm always asking. I'm grateful to Mazen. I can send him a WhatsApp message early morning or late evening and always get immediately an answer. So I think in Lebanon there was, in 2009, the Ministry of Youth and Sports published a strategy entitled Ministry of Youth and Sports Strategy 2010-2020. And many good things were written into the strategy, like specialization on most medal promising sports. The problem was, and is like with many other policies in Lebanon, implementation to continue and to continue. So I think it's not impossible for a country like Lebanon with limited resources to become successful in sport, but it needs a strategic approach and specialization, meaning identifying sports. I mean, we will not identify ice hockey as a medal promising sports, or equestrian or sailing. That's all expensive. But when we see in the all-times Olympic medal rankings, we have no country in the equestrian all-times ranking with a per capita GDP below $12,000. But we have, for example, in marathon, we have 7 countries in the top 10 with a GDP below $12,000. So we need to identify, of course, sports that are not costly, maybe individual and not team sports, and it's not impossible.
Thank you. Gaby, we have some students here and you are a professor. Can you tell them or propose some sports that they can specialize in the future to get some medals in the Olympics?
In track and field,
Yes.
it's going to be a little bit hard. Track and field is way beyond us.
Other sports?
I think that women should be well promoted because we are in a region where women is not well promoted. So Lebanon, it is a good chance to be here and promote women. That would help tremendously. I think women is the target.
Women.
Yeah.
Okay. Nadim, do you think that corruption is a huge barrier in front of sports, Lebanese sports, or can you tell us about corruption in Lebanon? Is it like low, medium, or high?
Thank you for bringing me new enemies again. Just I want to say, I think it is not the main problem, it is a big problem. The budget for sport in Lebanon, Ministry of Youth and Sport, is $2 million a year. It's 6 weeks of Wayne Rooney's salary, Manchester United player. So it's really not enough. The problem is, where is this money going? We don't have auditing, so we don't know exactly where the money is going. In my PhD thesis, I had to interview people from Minister of Youth and Sport. They told me that sometimes they send a report to the minister to say which association needs money, which associations are working. What happened, they receive phone calls from politicians telling them not to give money to the association, give to the others. And some of the associations receive money, some clubs are fictitious, they do not exist. They are just here, created by some politicians to vote, to put members in the federation. And these associations are receiving money. And some associations who are working very hard are not receiving any penny. This is a harsh reality. We have to face it and not to be hypocrite about it. We have many problems of sport in Lebanon. We don't have a lot of money. There is not a big fan base, very few sponsors, but corruption is a very big issue. We need to face it with really big hard work, I think.
Thank you, Nadim. Wadih, how is media dealing with this kind of corruption? You are our sports chief in now. Future sports chief.
It's necessary to lighting about it, highlighting about it. But I think in other way, we need a collective work, and we need a wise formula for Lebanon.
For media.
Not for media, for all sport. Media is a part of sport.
Yeah.
We have the officers, the players or the athletes, and the media. It's a triangle concerning that. But in general, about our sport, policy not only to have money, like a country like Lebanon, but the main issue in my part is how to adopt a policy for the sport, yes. The grassroots for the sport, the talent identification for the sport. It comes and to have many avenues of support, cares to direct it. So we need this part of to care out and to care hurry about it. And another way, you have the Lebanese diaspora.
Yes.
Way.
Yes.
So we can reach about. We have two examples before for the Davis Cup. Group Asian tennis in the Davis Cup Asian Oceania Group 2. We reached the Group 2. It's part of the big level in Asia. We have three of diaspora Lebanese.
Hisham
Zatini, Ali Hamedi, and Sean Karam. And after that, we have nothing. Yes. And the Pan-Arab Game 1999 in Amman, we have in gymnastics, Issa-El-Khoury.
Yes,
obtains 4 medals.
And lately we have in swimming Katia Bashroush.
In Doha 2011, but after that, where is the federation and to continue to work?
The last Olympic Games, you have Nassif in judo. He had some problem in his game, and in fencing we have the.
And I think now they have contact the Lebanese committee with some of diaspora for the next step, maybe.
It was a suggestion by the Council of Lebanon in Rio.
Yes.
Offering his help, if you want to say.
Okay.
Rio in other ways.
Last letter in the WISE formula with the Professor Reiche, E, for early learning. Early learning has 2 dimensions. The first is the flexibility to quickly react to changes in the Olympic program, being an early adopter of sports that were newly added to the Olympic program. Why early learning, Professor Reiche?
Well, I think the Chinese did pretty well in being flexible when women weightlifting in 2000 in Sydney was added to the Olympic program, for example. They sent out their scouts all over the country to identify women with favorable characteristics. And they won half of all women weightlifting gold medals since then. They would have won even more, but there are restrictions of how many participants you can have in one sport. So now we could see after rugby was added to the Olympic programs that some countries added it to the PE curriculum in schools. And I think now we have a lot of passion here for rugby at AUB. I was recently walking with my family when the tryouts happened. I think there were 100 students. I was really impressed. Plus, we have the first female rugby team in Lebanon, where something we can really be proud of. So this would be an example, for example, that Lebanon could promote rugby sevens. By the way, now in Rio we had 9 participants. 4 of them did not grow up in Lebanon.
Yes.
So 2 in the US, 1 in Australia, 1 in Brazil. And I think diaspora. So we all know we have a huge diaspora, but I think there's something we need to critically discuss. Does this contribute to the development of the Lebanese sports sector when we give citizenship to people who are not living here, who do not contribute to the development of the sector? I have to say I'm very critical, even if I see the rationale of having a larger team to portray the country on the global stage. But I think we should promote our domestic athletes in Lebanon who grew up here, who go here to high school, who study at AUB or other universities, and help them on their path to participate in future Olympic Games.
Yes.
Sports baccalaureate. Okay.
Professor, yes.
I want to add one thing on this. Maybe you know already, but it's a very important point, and it's becoming more and more important because some new sports are entering to the Olympic Games. For next Olympics, we have 5 new sports, which are wall climbing, surfing, karate, softball, baseball. It's a mix of 2, and skating. So it's only 4 years from now. So it's very good that if a country can really adapt. Usually, a lot of sport, they do the maximum in order to enter into the Olympics, and we have seen only 1 sport entering and another one going out. Because there is a limited number of sports. For Japan, now we have 5 sports entering in one time.
Yes. Mazen, Professor Reiche, he discussed some religious issues in his book. Can we say that the Lebanese Olympic Committee is ensuring equal Christian and Muslim representation in the Lebanese team in the Olympics?
This is, I can assure you 100% that we do not do it, and also we cannot do it because it's all a matter of qualification. So the athlete that goes to the Olympic is an athlete who has qualified internationally, not based on any race or
But there is
or
some
religion.
invitation. There is invitations and wild cards also, so you can balance the.
For this year, we have only three invitations.
Yes.
And one time, Dr. Reiche asked me this question: how many Christian and how many? I told him, believe me, I don't know. I have to go back to the names. And 2 of them, I cannot tell whether they are Christian. So definitely it's not the case.
So let's well, in London, since I was looking at the London Olympics, there were 10 Lebanese participants, and by coincidence, 5 Christians and 5 Muslims. But I think the broader issue is something Nadim Nassif has worked on, is to look at the federations. And Nadim stated in his research that 80% of the Lebanese sporting federations have a president and a secretary general from the same sect.
Yes.
So it's kind of that certain sports belong to certain sects. And the question is, does this encourage people from other sects to practice the sport, yes or no? I'm skeptical.
Yes. So before taking some questions, Professor Reiche, are you telling us that if Lebanon practices or has this wise formula, are we going to get medals in the future in the Olympic Games or not?
I very much hope so. I'm living since 8 years in Lebanon. My running gag is always, if a Lebanese would live since 8 years in Germany, he would get now German citizenship because it needs 8 years. to be eligible. So I cannot apply for Lebanese citizenship, but of course I'm living here since more than 8 years, and I feel half Lebanese and identify with the country, and I very much wish that the country can be successful in international sports. And I don't think it's impossible. Again, Fiji and Kosovo won gold medals in Rio.
Judo.
Lower GDP, smaller population size, but it needs effective action, something that is difficult for a weak state like Lebanon, but not impossible. It needs the implementation of strategies like the one from 2009, and then it's possible for Lebanon if such strategic approach includes, for example, as Gaby said, an emphasis on female athletes, if it's focusing on specific sports, preferable individual sports, gives them some extra funding. And if we have an institution that coordinates all this, I think it's not impossible.
Yes. Let me say that Lebanon started participating in the London Summer Olympics in 1948. The 1956 Olympic Games in Melbourne were boycotted by Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria in protest over the Suez crisis, during which Israel invaded Egypt, followed by Britain and France. And Lebanon was not able to send athletes to 1994 and 1998 Winter Olympics. Lebanese medalists at the Olympic Games are only four. 1952 Helsinki, Khalil Taha won the bronze medal in welterweight wrestling Greco-Roman. Also in Helsinki 1952, Zakaria Shahab took the silver in bantamweight, also wrestling Greco-Roman. After 20 years in Munich 1972, the famous Muhammad Khair Trabulsi took the silver middleweight weightlifting. And the last Lebanese medalist in Moscow 1980, Hassan Bshara took the bronze medal in super heavyweight in wrestling Greco-Roman. So 3 medals in wrestling, 1 in weightlifting, 2 bronze, 2 silver, no gold yet in the Gold War. These are the Lebanese medalists, 4 until now. And Hassan Bshara was the only Arab to take
it was the only Arab
athlete to take a medal in Moscow, 1980.
Yes. But nowhere is different.
Now it's different.
Yes.
All the Arab are taking medals, but Lebanon no.
So 8 years for Reiche, here is the 2 Olympiad.
Yeah. So we can take some questions from the audience here, like for our professor and
many times. Yep.
Dr.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tariq Sharaf. The panel and I are very good friends. I'm a PhD in sports management. I'm also a consultant for the International Olympic Committee and for FINA, the International Swimming Federation. I actually don't have a question. I have a few comments to say about this whole workshop. I think it's very important and interesting what you're saying, but I would just like to clarify a few points. Number one, in regards to religion, when we ask about religion and how many seats for Christians and Muslims, I would just like to be very clear that in the Olympic Charter, page 13, Fundamental Principles of Olympism, the 6th article says exactly, there shall be no discrimination on grounds of religion, race, gender. So for us sports persons, we don't deal with religion in sports. I don't really care if a person is Muslim or Christian or he's black or white. If I'm in a basketball team, I need a position 5, I need his skills, not his religion. So from that side, I think religion is sorted in terms of the Olympic movement and the Olympic world. In regards to the ranking system about the IOC, I think that the ranking system that Nadim has developed is excellent and is amazing. However, my only comment is that the IOC ranking is very accurate in what it's supposed to do. The IOC ranking only gives you the ranking for the Olympic Games. It doesn't give you the ranking per sport, per country on a yearly basis. Yes. So for what it's supposed to do, the IOC ranking is very good. Okay? Now, the general question is, why aren't we getting medals? That's a huge and vast topic, and it starts from the days of independence. Lack of interest, lack of investments, and lack of everything. But however, There are sports that do not need a lot of money. We can do through MOUs. We can talk, for example, I enjoy giving this example in Lebanon. Who is the best country in the world in Taekwondo? Korea, South Korea. They created it. Their army is the best one. How hard is it to do an MOU between the Lebanese army and the Korean army to bring one of their experts to live in Lebanon, in a Lebanese base with the army? He eats for free, he sleeps for free, the Korean government pays his salary, he trains my coaches and my athletes for free.
The army trains well.
This is one example. We can copy-paste it to all other sports. In terms of which sports do we have to support today, looking at the fact that our politicians are too busy stealing the money of the people, our recommendation is to go for individual sports, because as you say today, with the type of ranking that exists, 22 athletes in football bring you 1 medal. 22 athletes in taekwondo bring you 22 medals. When I'm in a country that doesn't have money, for example, Cuba or Egypt, what do? I go for individual sports, because I have a chance to get by far more medals than individual sports. This is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tarek. Nadim maybe has a... Sorry.
Yes, concerning the ranking, Dr. Sharaf, yes, actually, the IOC said clearly they don't do the ranking, it's just an information. What I'm saying is the researcher and the politician and the sport administrators, they take this ranking as a reference. What I'm saying, as a researcher, I don't think we must take this ranking as a reference to rank sport. I'm not criticizing the IOC.
Okay, thank you, Nadim. Thank you, Nadim. Thank you, Nadim. Please.
Daniel, thank you for this meeting. Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to read the book, but I will buy it and read it. You promise? Yeah, I promise.
Don't regularly go to the gym, I would remind you.
Going back to the discussion in this year, golden formula, WISE. Now I understood why we fail in Lebanon, because we are not applying any of these. We are not applying the women in sports, and we have an expert with us, Dr. Zainabina. She can speak more about it. We never have the institutions to follow up on different sports. Specialization and strategy are not clear, and early learning is not followed in this country. Actually, I will go back to the root, to the problem. The problem is politics, like everything else in this country. Whenever we talk about anything, we go back and we look for politics. Sports and politics go side by side. From my modest experience for the past 40 years in sports, 10 years as an athlete and like 30 years as an administrator, without any doubt, I can say you cannot get a position in sports, you cannot be effective in sports or efficient in sports unless there is this political leader behind you or this political chief, if you want. And as long as we are going to stick to this formula, I positively assure you that we can never achieve any factor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, hi. My name is Sami Garabedian, and I'm the Director of Athletics at the Lebanese American University. And Mr. Ghalib here, who's the Director of Athletics at the UB, was my captain when we played soccer at the UB quite a few years back. To build on what Ghalib just said, can I just give you a brief statistic on exactly what Ghalib is saying?
Yes.
In 2000, and Wadih will correct me if I'm wrong, we hosted the Asia Cup.
Yes.
And it was the first time that Lebanon ever had the first Minister of Youth and Sports. The last 5 ministers of youth and sports have absolutely nothing to do with sports. 3 of them are doctors, 2 medical doctors, 1 dentist,
The first one was dentist.
The first one was dentist.
Yes.
Then we had medical doctor, then we had Mr. Karami, and lately we have some guy in the army or a military guy. How do you expect, again, building on what Ghalib said, how do you expect to actually get somewhere when the people that are in the position, are at the core of the problem?
Thank you.
And one more thing, I'm sorry I'm saying this, but you spoke about whether Lebanon is successful in doing something. Now I'm speaking as the Secretary General of the Lebanese Rugby League Federation, and I don't know if people here know, but Lebanon in November of next year, will be playing in the World Cup 2017 in Sydney, and we are very, very proud of this. And building on what you said, that 70% of the team will be locals, and 30% will be expats from Australia, and we're very, very proud to have Lebanon play in the World Cup in 2017, and hopefully Wadih and I will be there.
Good luck.
Concerning about the ministry, Mr. Ramadan can highlight about the project for the
Danyel.
Yes.
Okay, in the red shirt, then.
Hi, my name is Hilal. I'm a student here. I want to start by congratulating Dr. Reiche for this book. I took the course with them here, and I was like so excited. I want to say thank you for Dr. Nassif for this ranking system. But like, I always have these arguments like, are all levels equal or not? And especially like students come in 10 types of the best athlete ever because they won 24 medals, and like the countries in the world even have more athletes.
Yes.
So my question is for Mr. Abdelnour. Like when it comes to the media, of course there's politics, but like even when it comes to the organization of the media, I don't see the focus that many sports deserve. Like, okay, we see basketball and some football, but I don't think we get it if there's an Asian championship for under 14 players. Like, I mean, the sports we care about. Like, I'm not gonna watch children on TV play. Like, why is it like this? Why is there?
What kind of sports do you care about?
Like, I'm a runner, so I care about track and field.
Track and field.
But, for example, I'm not gonna care about under 14.
Okay.
Boys.
But it's the system concerning the TV now. We have the right TV, all think about the system. But it needs, before that, it needs to, for the federation can make a good agenda about this event that you can follow up, highlights about up. Now, some TV make their work and their job concerning that, maybe on newspaper and in electronic media, but in general, we have in Lebanon an approach or a view about the collective games, the main games like basketball, volleyball, soccer game, they have popularities, yes.
Thank you, Amir.
Hi, Amir from Southwest. First of all, thank you for being here. I don't know, I found it very positive, the one talk, but we're talking about Lebanon, a country that we have problems with education, with health, etc., etc. So when we talk about individual sports, yes, of course, I agree with you 100%. But who do individual sports in Lebanon? The rich class. So you already have an obstacle when it comes to individual sports, which is the different stratas that we have in the society, even if we don't want to look at it. Who can play tennis in this country? Who can pay for $40 an hour for a coach? Or there was karate, taekwondo, anything. You need to pay for this.
The running is cheaper.
Huh?
Running is cheaper.
Yeah, running is cheaper. You can do it in the diet, maybe a car will go on the road. But this is a real problem because when we're talking, I come from Venezuela. So in Venezuela you have sports stadiums in every, let's say, favela or barrio. Everywhere there is a football court or there is a karate professor. Each municipality has one. So in Lebanon, there is no infrastructure for this. We're talking about having children do sports when even in schools, sports are undermined. You don't have scouts that go to schools to check who's doing well in what. You don't have good education. You put the children to play football, basketball, or handball, but there is no education on sports. So I'm sorry, it is a big question, but we are being positive. But what is the solution to all of this besides funding? Because funding is just one part.
He has already proven in my classes that he likes critical thinking. And I totally agree. We have a social gap here. You know, who can afford sport in Lebanon? Also, if we look at those who represent Lebanon at the Olympic Games, it's those who can afford the sports. And since there is absence of state support, the families have kind of to replace what in other countries the state would do. For example, in 2012 in London, we had an AUB student participating in table tennis. We were very proud of her that she qualified by winning the West Asian Table Tennis Championship. But she's a good example because her father brought in every summer a coach from China to promote
He was a
her
former,
development.
champion.
So thanks God, the family could support her. But there might be others with talent where the family cannot deliver such kind of support. So it's a social issue that the state is promoting sport and giving all equal access to it, that everybody can make it to the Olympic Games.
Let me say, Professor, to Amir, that 50 or 60 years ago, professionals were not allowed to participate in the Olympic Games. Only amateur were allowed, and until a few years, like the boxing federation started giving the green light for professionals to participate. So, like in the Olympic spirit, it was the Olympic Games was for amateur athletes, not for professional athletes.
I would like to about the talent identification. That's the real point that we need to improve in Lebanon.
Gaby?
I would like to not add, but bring some new things. Definitely, strategy is the biggest problem. There is no federation with a clear view for the 4 years. All the federations and the international committee, they work on 4 years plan. We have no plans. And Lebanese diaspora, although you don't like it for some reasons, but if the Lebanese diaspora is a mean, not an end, so if you can have a Lebanese diaspora that can build sports around a very solid core, that would be a great idea. But if you bring people to just participate once or twice and then we're done with it, then it's not healthy. Qatar, they have this advice, I can't remember the name. Aspire, thank you.
Aspire.
But they have plenty of new national Qatari, but they have a huge team.
95% of their athletes.
But today they are Qatari. The high jumper is amazing.
Yes.
But they built on diaspora or new. So it's very quickly when we say we don't like it or we do like it. You just have to work with it.
Gaby, I was asking at the Rio Olympic Games in the judo, I think, there was a Moldovan guy. He took a bronze medal for Emirates in the Olympic Games. So I asked his chief, why are you naturalizing athletes from Europe? He said not only to win medals we are bringing them. We are bringing them so they can teach our compatriots as models to win medals in the future. We have like 10 minutes before ending. Mr. Jarabi.
Mr. Mazen, I want to ask you, why don't we rely on our families?
Females, yes.
And popular, and they are more, they have larger number on our population than males. Males here in Lebanon are pressure are fundamental and economical skills. At least they are relaxed from this issue. We can rely on 5 or 10 years strategy and rely on them forward to bring us medals.
We should rely both on men and women, but as Dr. Danyel said, in Lebanon we don't have this problem of distinguishing the men. It's open for everyone who would like to do so.
Talking about our strategies didn't bring us medals. Why don't we change maybe they can bring us medals?
Yeah, this is what I call the window of opportunity that you can find in order to bring medal. You can find, as he gave an example of weightlifter under certain weight, minus 47 or whatever. So you can find some window of opportunity here and there. If it's the only target is to grab one medal at a point of time in the Olympics, and it might be one of the solutions.
Thank you.
Yes?
I want to ask you, if it's possible to build a national center for big complex to maybe centralize the sport in Lebanon, and it won't be run by federation, but by the persons that only care about sport.
As an academy.
Are you asking Professor Reiche? Let us say Mazen can answer.
Of course, this can be done, but as I said in the beginning, that it's a governmental strategy, whether you want to invest so much in sport. I'm not saying that it's going to be. unreachable, but it can be done for sure. However, this kind of not only requires infrastructure, but it requires high-level coaches, and also it requires professionalism. So there can people that can come, they can put enough time in order to get the proper training and the needed hours of training. In swimming, those who goes to the Olympic medals, they train mostly 8 to 10 hours a day. So who can afford this unless you can give him an alternative in his life to be able to spend so much time? So it's not only the infrastructure it's spending, but of course it's one.
Comment from Professor.
It's interesting. I mean, the comparative view. We have some countries which operate elite sport institutions that do not rely on state money. The U.S. Olympic Committee, for example, gets money from sponsoring and TV. I mean, the latter would be more difficult here, but it operates independent from the state. And we have other countries like Norway, but also partly China, where the revenue for elite sport comes not from the state budget, but from public lotteries. So maybe we also have to think about ways, another source of revenues than the state budget.
Yes, thank you. 2 questions. Last 2 questions. Please.
Hi, I'm Bashar Shamal. I start recently. I would like to say that very important to promote for sport, but in parallel we have to fight something else. One of the things we have to fight is smoking, something related to culture, the shisha.
Yes.
If you go tonight to the Corniche, you will see hundreds of young boys are sitting in the Corniche, just a big hurdle in front of sport for the country. So, sportsmanship will help things a lot.
It shows that everything is related with each other, right? I mean, so we cannot discuss sport separately. It's related with the educational system, it's related with the health system, and it needs to have interlinkages with all these policy areas to succeed.
Yes. Last question.
Thank you.
I'm just happy that you are creating the debate. I have lots of thoughts and then I can talk about lots of subjects that I won't know because it's not maybe the time. But I want to thank you, Dr. Reiche, because you are creating the debate. And since you are talking all about and you are about our concerns and you want to develop, I think something will happen in the next
Positive.
So you should know that Zaina Mina was a 1984 participant of the Olympic Games. So we have today here 1% of the all-time Olympic participants from Lebanon with Gaby and Zaina. Because there were 221 Olympic participants in the history of Lebanon, and Zaina and Gaby, and both of them became university professors. So it seems not to hurt in life.
Okay, last word from.
Football. Football has the highest weight. Then you have basketball, then tennis, then you have athletics and aquatics. Not swimming. Aquatics is a sport.
All disciplines.
Swimming, water polo, synchronized swimming, diving are part of aquatics.
Synchronized.
And then this is a top 5 sport.
No shisha?
Shisha, no. Soon maybe.
But some player smokes shisha.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much.